Welcome to Think for Yourself Clubhouse. My name is Bill Martin, and we're interviewing John Kulewicz today, candidate for Ohio Attorney General. My co-host is Dennis Reinhart. Welcome, Dennis. John, I'm going to give a few notes here. You're a graduate of Yale Law School.
Yes, sir.
You're a candidate for Ohio Attorney General, so you got to be a lawyer.
Right.
So you graduated from Yale. Litigation partner in Voorhees Sater firm in Columbus. That's one of the biggies.
Right.
And you were in the appellate branch there, which means that you did the drafting of the briefs for the appeals court, and then you go into the appeals court and make arguments standing up on your hind legs and getting questions from the judges panel up there. And that could be the Court of Appeals, it could be the Ohio Supreme Court, it could be a federal court, it could be the United States Supreme Court.
Right. I had the privilege of arguing and winning cases in the Supreme Court of the United States, the Supreme Court of Ohio, federal and state courts all around the state of Ohio.
As we would expect from a guy from Voorhees.
Well, I loved working there. It was I was there for 44 years as a lawyer, and I was privileged to be there. Some extraordinary lawyers there. The firm has a wonderful ethic to it, or culture to it. We always put the needs of the client first, but we were very much focused on teamwork and teamwork to serve the client. And it was a very intense time for 44 years. High stakes cases. I was. Like any lawyer, I was honored when clients would repose in me the trust to handle some of the most important matters of their lives, that by definition, if they're going to court. And I took that responsibility very seriously. My job was to study the facts, study the law, give my independent judgment as to what's in the best interest of the client, and then pursue it zealously. And that's what I did, and that's what I'll do as Attorney General.
And I think that's a pretty good précis of what an Ohio Attorney General does, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Just if I could digress for 1 second, the first two men who I ever met who had been Attorney General of their state, they're very, very different politically, but they both said the same thing. The one was the late John W. Bricker. He had been a 5-term governor of Ohio and 2-term U.S. senator. Ran for president in 1944, and I interviewed him when I was in college at Ohio State. I did a lengthy paper on his presidential campaign, and I asked him once, I said, what was your favorite job? Because he had served on the Public Utilities Commission as Attorney General, as governor, and then as U.S. Senator. I asked him, what was your favorite job in your career? And he said, Attorney General. And I was startled because he had served at the highest levels of the state and federal governments, and I said, why? And he said, because it was very simple. Every day I went to the office, I just did the right thing. And that made sense to me. But then a couple years later, I met Bill Clinton when he was a very young governor of Arkansas at the time. And he had served as Attorney General before he became governor. And I asked him, I said, how do you like being governor? And he said, well, John, I like it, but I actually preferred being Attorney General. And I said, why? And he, liberal Bill Clinton said almost exactly the same thing as very conservative John Bricker. He said, because every day I just got up, went to the office, and did the right thing. And as Attorney General, that's what I intend to do. I think the office has gotten far too involved in politics, and we really need to get back to just the law, applying the law without regard to partisanship or other extraneous factors. Just what's in the best interest of the people of the state of Ohio, and then do it, and let the chips fall where they may.
Good for you. And you've got into politics. You're a member of Upper Arlington City Council.
Yes.
And I think you've had how many terms?
I'm in the middle of my second term.
Okay. And you must know Allison Russo.
I do. She lives a couple blocks away from me.
Okay. Allison's been to Jackson County, one of the few state-level politicians, including yourself, who come to Jackson County.
Right. Well,
and want to meet the people. And we're so glad to have you here.
Well, it's wonderful to be here. I was here last year and enjoyed it very much, and I'm very glad to be back this year.
Okay, well, let's start with some other things. Your name is Kulewicz, right, and the last two letters are CZ, right, which led me to write on my notes, what is your ethnicity, John?
Right, it's Polish. My paternal side, it was from Poland. My grandfather was from a small Polish village. It's now in Belarus. The lines got redrawn after the World War II, but his school certificate listed him as a Polish peasant of the Roman Catholic faith. And he was born in 1894. He came over to the United States in 1914. And
would this be great grandfather?
My grandfather.
Grandfather.
He came over and he left Europe in February 1914, right before what they called then the Great War, which we know as World War I, right before that broke out. And he came over and ended up in Martins Ferry, Ohio, up the river, and served in the U.S. Army when World War I broke out. His mother, who was back in the old country, was solely dependent upon him for support, so he was put in the non-combatant unit down in San Antonio that was outfitting soldiers getting ready to go into battle. And he served there. He got his honorable discharge, and then came back and worked in Martins Ferry his entire life in the mills, and as a laborer in the mills. My grandmother, she came over. They didn't know each other until they met in Martins Ferry, but she and her family came over in 1912. In the spring of 1912, the family lures that they were supposed to be on the Titanic, which departed in April 1912, and but either her brother had the measles or her father had an eye problem. The authorities would not let them on the boat. So they had to wait for the next boat out.
Talk about lucking out, huh?
Well, definitely. I mean, they certainly would have been in third class, which was the most perilous class to be in under what happened like that. But she made it over here in 1912, and she likewise ended up in Martins Ferry. Her mother ran a boarding house where my grandfather was staying, and nature took its course from there.
Well, and did Grandpa come through Ellis Island? I don't know.
Did. He did. He came arrived in March 1914, and my wife is an immigrant as well. She came from France when she was a little girl. They came to Ohio, but so in March of 2014, on the 100th anniversary of when my grandfather arrived, my wife and I rented out a large the balcony of Ellis Island there. We had a big lunch. We invited all of our extended family and our friends and to commemorate the occasion, and it was wonderful. But the thing I'll never forget, we had a program after the lunch, and I got up to speak, and I stood up and I looked at everybody there, and there was a room of about 100 people, and they all had been, had thrived in America like that, and it was all because of the decisions that my grandfather made. He had the courage to leave the old country and come here in search of a better life, and my grandmother and her family separately came in. You look at a room like that, and it just, and in the starkest possible terms, the beauty of America, what the opportunity they had here. They worked extremely hard their entire lives, and so did everybody in the room. So nobody was given anything or handed everything, but they just worked. And you can't turn around and look at a room like that and not think, what a privilege, what a wonderful country it is. We have there.
This is the American story,
and
your family
in living color.
Yeah,
my mother's family had come over centuries before from England during the time of Oliver Cromwell. There was that interregnum there between the kings, and we don't know. This is so far back, we don't know for sure. It was either to flee political oppression, or it was when the colonies were just being settled here. So they came over at that point in time and thrived and ended up in Kentucky eventually, and then in Cincinnati.
My mother is an English war bride, World War II.
Really?
War bride. She's
Really?
English. Yeah.
Where does she live?
In New Barnet, north suburb of London.
Yeah.
I visited there a few times.
Yeah.
And she would tend to run up the Union Jack and salute the thing every once in a while. But that's just English for you. That's the way they are.
Well, yeah.
But you'd say she's a Yank now, is what she'd say.
Well, it's a proud heritage.
Yeah.
We were there in 2014 on the 70th anniversary of D-Day. I swim a lot, so I've been captain of 3 English Channel relay teams, and we on the 70th anniversary of D-Day in June of 1914, I had a team that was British, American, and Canadian swimmers, and we crossed the channel. It was the first crossing of the channel that year. It was early in the season, but it was so wonderful, and we had to wait for a couple of days, just like General Eisenhower and the troops, because of the weather, had to wait until we had clear weather. But during those days, they televised heavily on British TV all the commemoration ceremonies, and it was one of the last times that actual veterans of D-Day would have been there. You get just completely choked up seeing them and realizing what they did. And you swim an hour at a time all the way across the channel, but in the end the pilot let us all go in together, and when we got to the beach there, we were swimming and it was a pleasant, calm, pleasant day. But the minute we hit the ground, like you see what these guys went through. I mean, they would have been deadly seasick, scared to death. You have bullets flying all around you. You have barbed wire. You have body parts. You have mayhem. You have smoke. You have chaos, confusion, like that. And you have an 80-pound pack on your back, and the water is freezing cold. And so I mean, we admired the courage of everybody in the D-Day force before we did that, and even more so after that. So,
and many people don't think about that these were 18-year-old kids.
Exactly.
A lot of them. When we were in Italy, we went to Monte Cassino, and the cemetery was there. And my daughter was 18 at the time, and I was coaching 18-year-old kids. And I was walking through just row after row of 18-year-olds that had died at Monte Cassino.
Yeah.
And we just don't think about these people had not even started their lives yet, and the sacrifice that they made for us,
Whenever we think of freedom of speech, we can thank them. Whenever we think of freedom of religion, we can thank them. Whenever we think of the privileges we have as citizens, whenever we think of our form of government, we can thank them because they paid for it. They paid for the ultimate price. And I just, we a couple years after that, on the 80th anniversary when PT 109 went down, President Kennedy's boat over in the Solomon Islands. I led a team of swimmers over there, and my father grew up in Martin's Ferry. He was drafted in the beginning of the war, and he was on Guadalcanal and on the way to other places in the South Pacific. But he's passed away. But I'd give anything just to have a couple more hours with him to talk about it, because you see how formative that experience was for me. Here's 18, 19-year-old guys, just got out of high school, probably never been out of Ohio even, and then all of a sudden you're literally halfway around the world, hostile territory, hostile from the enemy, the environment, the uncertainty, the circumstances like that, and how formative that was for them. You realize what they went through, and
it was formative for the country too, because every small town, every large town, every city had hundreds and thousands of young men, mostly young men, went overseas and went through that experience and came back profoundly affected. Right. But we're going to talk about more prosaic things for a little bit now. We're going to talk about politics and political issues and public policy and how they may relate to the office of Ohio Attorney General, John. And one topic that's on everybody's mind at the moment, especially our rural cousins, is the data centers in Ohio. And we know that rural folk in Ohio are particularly concerned that these big data centers are going to simply take away farmland, because they've, in Jackson County anyway, the place that they can get at the aquifer and spread out with a big plant is exactly the same place where farmers have grown corn for generations. Right. And these companies are coming to town, they're making a lot of promises. Can you describe for a few minutes what you think the role of Ohio Attorney General might be in some of these disputes that arise as a result of the onrush of data centers into rural Ohio?
Certainly, rural and urban Ohio, for that matter. The first thing, one of the first things I want to do as Attorney General is to put together a guide quickly for people in communities where data centers want to come in. Say, here are your rights, here are your options, here are your alternatives, here are the things you need to take into consideration. So just give people, because these data centers come into town. They surprise most people. A lot of them are there after non-disclosure agreements and silence and secrecy. Then all of a sudden they spring up. It takes everybody by surprise. People need to know, well, first and foremost, what are our options here? What can we do? And how can we do it? Where can we go? What's available to us? The Attorney General has a similar, they call it the Sunshine Manual. If you ever have any questions about what does the Public Records Law require, what does the Open Meetings Act require, you can go to the Sunshine Manual and look it up. I'd like to put together promptly the same sort of thing about data centers. When a data center comes to town, here's what you can do. Here's the things you need to consider. Here's what you can do. To the extent there are any covenants with the state government, the Attorney General is the chief law officer of the state of Ohio and certainly would be in a position to enforce those. The Attorney General has broad investigative authority and subpoena power. which could be very useful in getting to the bottom of a lot of these. It's important. The Attorney General also has the ability, the pulpit, so to speak, to explain to people what's happening here. So much of this we're just finding out after the fact. That it's come to light that 15 years ago, there 30 to 40 year tax exemptions were given to sales tax exemptions were given to data centers like that. And we need to consider the legalities about that, whether an administration can tie up the state that long.
Mm-hmm.
But there are serious questions about that. So the Attorney General, I think, it can be a spokesperson to say, look, just to start clearing the air. Here are the facts we have to deal with. So.
Yeah, your initial remark, I was remembering that I had spoken in a podcast with Jessica Baker, who is the lady over in Claremont County who helped start the constitutional amendment that says no data centers over 25 megawatts, which is I thought, a pretty thoughtful way to approach the problem. And the first thing she said to me, I got involved in this thing because I found out that there were some land transactions. She's in the real estate business. And there were a lot of, what she called them NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. So she kept asking questions and nobody would tell her anything. So she started pressing.
Yeah.
And ultimately she wound up spearheading a constitutional amendment campaign, which may or may not work, but it's the kind of the thrust of some citizen just getting out there and doing what she can, and bless her heart.
But I know that the General Assembly is considering legislation about non-disclosure agreements. I hope they take that very seriously. One of the things I've learned for sure on City Council in Upper Arlington is that when something controversial is coming about, the worst thing that you can do is clamp down on information. If you restrict the flow of information, the dissemination of information, you're asking for trouble like that, because people naturally project their worst assumptions into a situation like that. So it's vitally important, especially if something's controversial or important to the community, vitally important to get the information out there so that the public can deal with it. You can debate whether it's good or bad like that, but you need the information for the community to be engaged. And if you stop the flow of information, if you cut people off, then everyone's going to assume the worst, and it's going to escalate the severity of the problem.
Like one of the things they do is use an enormous amount of electricity.
Right.
And one of the threats is that consumers in Ohio will be responsible and their electric utility bills will go up. As an attorney general, I mean, is there anything that an attorney general can do to step into a situation where people feel, we shouldn't be responsible for paying this private corporation's electric bills?
Especially if some people believe that this whole thing is being overbuilt, and a lot of these companies are going to go bust. And what they do, of course, is they set up a shell corporation for this particular little data center.
Yeah.
And then if that shell corporation goes bankrupt, well, then the parent company's okay.
Yeah. Right.
And there's no performance bond or anything like that to assure performance. So the ordinary folks could get stuck with cleanup of the site. They could get stuck with paying the utility bills for.
Yeah. What can the attorney general do
enhancements
in situations like that?
Well, for starters, the Attorney General is the lawyer for the Public Utilities Commission, and any good lawyer is going to advise his or her client as to what their obligations are. And you want to make sure we hold the feet of the Public Utilities Commission to the fire in setting rates, and especially when something new like this comes along. Number two, the Attorney General, as the lawyer for the state of Ohio, needs to remember that the state of Ohio is also a consumer of electricity. So the Attorney General, in my view, has the right to get involved in these rate proceedings on behalf of the client, the state of Ohio, which is paying rates here too, and to make sure that those rates are fair. And by doing that, I think that will have a ripple effect throughout the system. There are a number of ways that the Attorney General can do to affect electricity, any utility rates. I just what I hear time and time again after we've had almost 36 years of almost uninterrupted one-party rule in Ohio, and what I hear time and time again are these excuses. Well, I'm sorry, we can't do anything, or it's not our responsibility, or it's somebody else's responsibility. There's nothing we can do. I could not disagree more. Any good attorney is going to find a way to get something done lawfully to get it done lawfully. But I'm not going to throw up my hands and sit in my office and say, I'm sorry, I can't do anything. I'm going to find ways to do stuff for people to make life better here for everybody.
Okay, good. We're going to change topics a little bit. Another topic that's around Ohio a lot is Medicaid fraud. Now, we have lots of folks on Medicaid in rural Ohio.
Right.
I would think that the Ohio Attorney General would have an obvious role in Medicaid fraud.
Right. Where there is Medicaid fraud, I will prosecute it, regardless of who the perpetrator is. I have no hesitation going after that. We vitally need Medicare in the state of Ohio. We need to use every dollar that we get for Medicaid rather, which is going to be a shrinking amount of dollars. Evidently, we need to use that for the people who are eligible for Medicaid and need it for Medicaid. Wherever there is Medicaid fraud, we need to go after it. My opponent he's taken a different approach to it. He came upon what some have now called persuasive evidence of gigantic fraud several months ago, and his attitude was, let's wait and see what happens, like that. So months go by and nothing gets done. There have been several situations of demonstrated inappropriate payments where there's been no finding for recovery, no referral to a prosecutor, not even asking for the money back, just saying we can't do it. The ultimate goal of my opponent, as he told a reporter in another context, is just to get rid of Medicaid. And he said we would all be better off if we just get rid of these unnecessary government programs like that. I could not disagree more. I could not disagree more. We vitally need Medicaid in the state of Ohio. Number one, it's the most cost-effective way to handle health care for people who cannot afford it. And number two, what he proposes to get rid of Medicaid, it would certainly get rid of Medicaid fraud. But we're going to imperil the health care coverage of 3 million people in the state of Ohio if we do that, and of community after community after community in Ohio that needs the Medicaid dollars.
I feel a little frustration in this area because, especially as a young lawyer, we had things called VA guardianships. A VA guardianship is oftentimes a young lawyer becomes a guardian for a person who's disabled and receives Veterans Administration benefits. And that was a court-supervised guardianship. I had to file periodic accounts to the penny. And by golly, there was a field rep, Veterans Administration field rep, that visited me about once a year, wanted to see the books. I visited the veteran to see if he was getting along all right, that he was actually where he was supposed to be. And I'm thinking the Veterans Administration devoted a fairly considerable amount of money to hiring these field folks to actually look at the problems out in the field. And I can't imagine that Medicaid would not have a similar approach, that they would have actual field investigators from the get-go watching the process as it goes through, instead of apparently the way we're doing it now is you wait until a scandal hits and then you try to clean it up.
Right.
To me, that's poor administration. I think the Veterans Administration had it right, even though they had to spend some money on those field workers. Right. To keep an eye on where the Veterans Administration money was going. That's just my view. Dennis, you had a comment.
Oh, I was just going to say in this area of the state that we have such a large percentage of children. I'm a retired school teacher, and I've seen a lot over the years that are on Medicaid, right, that depend upon Medicaid. We also have what I call are the working poor, who do not earn enough of a living wage to take care of their families. So things like Medicaid and SNAP are so important. So, it can't be this scattergun approach, and people can't be vilified, for being on Medicaid and turn it into some sort of a political tool. And really, the people that need it need to keep it, and they don't need to get rid of it, because there would be many people in Appalachian Ohio that would suffer because of that being gone. There's just nothing for them, there.
It's a program that we need to find a way to make it work. The audits and follow-up and safeguards against waste, fraud, and abuse are a necessary adjunct to that, which plainly. We need to know why that's not been done. Over the past years, we substantially expanded Medicaid in Ohio in 2013 or 14, I believe it was. Why that's not been done, I don't know. The Republican Party has been in charge the whole time. We need to ask them, but we need to save the system. Too much depends upon it.
I think if we're being frank, we'll probably find a similar sort of problem in Minnesota and some other states, that it's a widespread problem, and I'm not sure. I think it's a case of poor administration, and I think both parties can be faulted for that. But I think the important thing is we need to start paying attention to it and make it better.
Absolutely, definitely. We need to make it work.
Okay, moving along. In your campaign literature, you've got the phrase antitrust, and I think you use the phrase price fixing, and
Yes.
I wanted to see if we could bring that down to earth and see what that means to folks in Ohio.
What it means to me is that a well-functioning economy depends upon businesses competing with each other to provide goods and services to the people. And the way you compete is you provide a better good or a lower price for people. If we find evidence of companies that decide that, hey, instead of competing against each other by lowering prices and us making less money, why don't we stop competing so we can corner the market and raise prices for everybody like that? If I find that as Attorney General, we're going to go after them, because it hurts us as consumers, but makes it too expensive for us to buy or to rent what we need. It hurts small businesses, that it thwarts them getting into the market, and it hurts farmers in every corner of the state by giving them fewer and fewer alternatives to buy the things that they need and to sell the things that they grow. So if people are colluding, conspiring, making secret deals, secret agreements behind the scenes to stop competing so they can raise their prices, I want to go after them. We've got to stop that. We can't allow that.
This is an area where you have specific statutes to help you, don't you?
There are specific statutes to help us like that. I've fought monopolies. I've fought monopolies in the Supreme Court of the United States. I've got a very successful track record in defending healthcare. I took a case to the Supreme Court 4 years ago for our client, and which is trying to protect the resources of its employee group health plan. We have 157 million Americans depend upon employer group health plans to fund our health care needs. There was a monopolistic provider that was trying to take advantage of the employer group health plans. We fought them, and we won in the Supreme Court. It was unanimous on all but one issue, and even that one we won 7-2, and we made life better for 157 million people by doing that. So that's that's the kind of experience and judgment I want to bring to the Attorney General's office.
Well said, sir. Drugs have been a problem in rural Ohio generally, especially in rural Ohio. And lately there have been some initiatives in the court system to help with the drug problem. The late Judge Mark T. Music commenced a drug court program in Jackson County, in which Mark usually put it that, well, fella, you can either go to treatment or you can go to jail, take your pick, and they usually pick the treatment. And if you stick with it and work that program, frequently you get a good result. Not all the time by any means, but frequently you get a good result. And Mark Music, Judge Music, had enough success with that program that it made it well worthwhile. I'm taking as an Ohio Attorney General, you would support such initiatives in the criminal law area.
Absolutely. They've been successful or tried. They perform a vitally important service. One of the surprises that I've seen, that I saw last year when I was going to all 88 counties, was how much the scourge of drugs is still with us. But one of the opportunities I saw, one other sector of society that's doing a lot of very valuable work in combating drugs and helping people get over drugs are churches. Churches throughout Ohio are offering very valuable counseling by ministers who, many of them have been saved themselves from drug problems, have emerged from drug problems like that. They can give counseling like nobody else can to people. They know the road people are on. They know how difficult it is to get over a problem like that. And every time they help somebody to recovery, it is a victory. It's a victory for them, a victory for the people, a victory for their families, and for Ohio. So, to the additional extent to which we can encourage our churches and our religious clerics to help in that would be very valuable.
Another special segment of the population that sometimes finds its way into the court system is veterans, especially if you have veterans who have stress-related illness, might find themselves in the court system. And I think the court systems are recognizing that and have, I think they even use sometimes the phrase veterans court. so that there are specific treatment programs
Right.
for the veteran. I think that's something else I'm sure the Ohio Attorney General's office would support.
Absolutely. I want to give special recognition to veterans throughout the state of Ohio. That we owe what we have to them. If it were not for them and for the danger to which they expose themselves and in which many lost their lives, we would not have what we have. So we need to acknowledge that every single day.
Okay. The last topic I'd like to discuss today is public corruption. Ohio is a leader in public corruption. Larry Householder, Speaker of the House at the time he got convicted, now sitting in the penitentiary, atoning for his crimes. How does the Ohio Attorney General's office approach public corruption?
I think the Ohio Attorney General should be leading the fight against corruption in the state of Ohio, wherever it exists, certainly in the state government and in any local governments. We should not stand back and wait for others to take the lead. The Attorney General has a responsibility as Chief Law Officer of the state of Ohio to make sure that our legal system is working. If there's corruption that is impeding the operation of our state government, we need to take it on and address it and get rid of it.
Now, I know you're not allowed to address specific problems in specific cases because that's kind of a prejudgment that you don't want to get into. But if there were still instances of corrupt officials in the state government who have not yet been prosecuted, would it be the policy of the Ohio Attorney General's office to try to ferret that out?
Absolutely, yes. And to do that without regard to partisan considerations.
That's right.
It'll make no difference to me whether the official involved is a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, or who they are. The partisanship has no role to play in a decision like that. If they are corrupt, if they are injuring the state government, if they're defrauding the people of the state of Ohio, they need to be out of office. They need to pay a price for that.
Yeah, I think we're finding on the national level that the corruption is almost overwhelming. Every day in the news is something else that they're doing. So at least you can build a bulwark around the boundary of the state of Ohio and say no corruption here.
We have the right to an honest government in Ohio in which the officials abide by the same standards that the rest of us are expected to abide by. And as Attorney General, I'll pursue that vigorously.
Okay.
I think the biggest thing that's been missing has been accountability. And you really can't have a representative democracy unless your elected officials are accountable to you.
Right.
And I think we have elected officials who think that they are beyond accountability, some of them, and there are various reasons for that, gerrymandering and all these other things. But I think it's going to be really important to kind of return us to, hey, the rule of law means something, and you are a public servant, and therefore you are accountable to us.
Right. I think the people of Ohio are getting ready to say that in a very loud voice this November. Everywhere I go in the state of Ohio, people have had enough. And it's among the interesting things that we have 8 million registered voters in the state of Ohio, roughly. 1.3 million are vote either in the Democratic or Republican primaries, but 6.7 million registered voters are not affiliated with either party. They're not looking for platforms. They're not looking for parties. They're looking for practical solutions. They're looking for people who are going to get the job done. And it drives people nuts. Rightly so, when all they hear is elected officials saying, well, that's not my responsibility, it's his responsibility, or I can't do that, that's his job, like that. That infuriates people. Because what we expect as citizens is for the government to get the job done. I don't care whose responsibility it is, get the job done. The government has to work together to get the job done for the people of Ohio. And I think the people of Ohio are getting ready to say that in unequivocal terms. Everywhere I go in the state of Ohio, people feel like they've not been listened to. They feel like the things that are most important to them, protecting their pensions, protecting their health care, protecting their kids, protecting our schools, protecting our environment, these day-to-day things like that, they're not glamorous, but they're vitally important to our families. They want the government to get the job done. They don't care whose responsibility it is. Just get the job done. You and government, figure it out, but don't be pointing fingers at each other. Just get the job done for us, the people. And that's if we can restore that ethic to the government realizes that we are there. The government is there for the people. The government's not there just to exist on its own. It's there to get a job done for the people. And I think everywhere I go in the state of Ohio, I hear people getting ready to say that loud and clear.
Well, thank you. Do you have any other remarks? Any topics you'd like to bring up, or? If not, any closing remarks you might have?
It's wonderful to be in Jackson County. I was here last year when was going to all 88 counties and had a wonderful time here. You tried to speak with the Democratic chair in each county and to get the lay of the land, but then rather than look for other influential people in town, I swim every day. So I swim in all 88 counties, and in Jackson you have one of the most wonderful outdoor pools and outdoor community pools. It's a 50-meter pool. It's really wonderful. I met a young lifeguard there, Max Gentry, who was a remarkable young man. He had won a full scholarship to Ohio State, and before he even went to college, he and his buddies, they formed 2 businesses, one of which was a nonprofit to provide shoes to school-age children in Vinton, Pike, and Jackson counties who needed them. And you meet a person like that, and you can't help but just have boundless optimism for what the future of the state is going to be.
Sure. Dennis?
That's about it right there. The main thing is it's good hearing that you will take this job as being a nonpartisan job and
Right.
apply things equally no matter who,
Right.
you know.
The law is not red or blue, it is black and white, and that's the approach I intend to take.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Okay.